20 enemy ships sunk, 5 war patrols, 8 months of combat. USS Wahoo wasn't just the most successful submarine in the Pacific War, she was the most aggressive submarine in naval history. And here's what made her different. Most submarines in World War II submerged, firing torpedoes from hiding and then diving deep to escape. That's what submarines do. They hide. They're ambush predators. USS Wahoo didn't hide. She attacked on the surface. In broad daylight, with her deck gun blazing, her commander standing on the bridge directing fire like a destroyer captain, not a submarine commander. And it worked. For 8 months, USS Wahoo terrorized Japanese shipping like no submarine before or since. Enemy captains reported being attacked by what they thought was a surface raider, not realizing they'd been hunted by a submarine that refused to act like one. And then in October 1943, USS Wahoo entered the Sea of Japan, the most heavily defended body of water in the Pacific Theater, and never came back. 80 men, one of the most legendary commanders in U.S. Navy history, the submarine that changed how America fought underwater warfare. Gone. This is the story of USS Wahoo and Commander Dudley "Mush" Morton, the man who turned submarine warfare from cautious stalking into aggressive combat. The commander who believed submarines should fight on the surface, who proved that audacity could sink more ships than caution, and who paid the ultimate price for being too aggressive in a war where aggression was exactly what was needed. 20 ships, 8 months, 0 fear, and 1 fatal mistake. Let's start with Commander Dudley Walker Morton, because to understand USS Wahoo, you have to understand the man who transformed her from an average submarine into a legend. 1942. The United States is losing the Pacific War. Japan controls vast territories from Burma to the Marshall Islands. American submarines are supposed to strangle Japanese supply lines, but they're not performing well. Here's why. Most American submarine commanders in early World War II were trained in a pre-war doctrine that emphasized caution. Avoid detection, attack submerged, fire torpedoes from maximum range, dive deep and run silent, don't take risks. Problem is, that cautious approach wasn't sinking enough ships. American submarines had technical problems, torpedoes that ran too deep or failed to explode, but they also had a leadership problem. Too many commanders were playing it safe. Opportunities were being missed because captains wouldn't take risks. And then there was Dudley Morton. Born 1907 in Owensboro, Kentucky, Naval Academy class of 1930, nicknamed Mush, supposedly because his mouth moved before his brain engaged, though those who served with him say it was because he had a face like mush after a boxing match. Whatever the origin, Mush Morton was different from the beginning. He was loud, gregarious, confident to the point of arrogance. He drank bourbon, told stories, laughed loudly, and had absolute zero tolerance for caution. In a submarine service that valued quiet professionalism, Morton was a cowboy. And in early 1942, nobody was quite sure what to do with him. Morton's first submarine assignment was as executive officer, second in command of USS Dolphin. Then he transferred to USS R-5, an old training submarine. Neither posting was glamorous. He wasn't being groomed for command, he was being sidelined. And then in December 1942, Morton was assigned as executive officer of USS Wahoo under Commander Marvin Kennedy. USS Wahoo SS-238 was a Gato-class fleet submarine, 311 feet long, crew of 80, 10 torpedo tubes, 2 deck guns. She'd been commissioned in May 1942 and had just completed her first 2 war patrols. Those first 2 patrols were underwhelming. Patrol 1, 0 ships sunk. Wahoo fired torpedoes at multiple targets and missed every time. Patrol 2, one small cargo ship sunk. Not exactly inspiring. Commander Kennedy was a competent officer, but he followed the standard doctrine: cautious, by-the-book approaches. Fire from long range. Avoid surface combat. Don't take unnecessary risks. Mush Morton hated it. Morton believed submarines were being wasted. He thought they should be more aggressive. Get closer to targets. Attack on the surface if necessary. Use the deck gun instead of precious torpedoes when appropriate. Fight like a warship, not hide like prey. And during Wahoo's third patrol in January 1943, Morton got his chance to prove his theory. Commander Kennedy became ill, severe enough that he couldn't effectively command. Standard procedure would be to abort the patrol and return to base. Morton convinced Kennedy to remain aboard, but turned tactical command over to him as executive officer. Kennedy would technically still be captain, but Morton would run the combat operations. And everything changed. January 24, 1943, USS Wahoo was patrolling near Wewak Harbor, New Guinea. Morton spotted a Japanese convoy, one destroyer and two cargo ships. Standard doctrine: submerged approach, fire torpedoes from range, dive deep, escape. Morton did something else. He took Wahoo to periscope depth, closed to point-blank range, less than 1,000 yards, and fired a spread of torpedoes directly into the convoy. Two cargo ships hit, both sinking. The destroyer turned to attack. Depth charges incoming. Standard doctrine: go deep, run silent, hope they lose contact. Morton ordered Wahoo to periscope depth and charged the destroyer. He charged the destroyer. Instead of running from the escort, Morton maneuvered Wahoo to fire torpedoes down the throat, directly at the oncoming warship. It's one of the most dangerous shots in submarine warfare. If you miss, the destroyer is right on top of you. Morton didn't miss. The torpedo struck the destroyer amidships and broke her in half. 3 ships in one action, and Morton had violated every standard procedure in the book. When Wahoo returned to Pearl Harbor in February 1943, the Navy had a decision to make: court-martial Morton for insubordination or promote him. They chose promotion. Commander Kennedy was reassigned, and on February 17, 1943, Dudley Mush Morton was given command of USS Wahoo. The Navy just handed its most aggressive officer its most aggressive submarine, and the legend was born. March 1943, USS Wahoo's third war patrol under Morton's command, and it became the stuff of submarine legend. Morton made immediate changes to how Wahoo operated. First, he reorganized command structure. In most submarines, the captain manned the periscope during attacks. He looked through the scope, called bearings, and made firing decisions. Morton said that was inefficient. His executive officer was Lieutenant Richard O'Kane, who would later become one of the most successful submarine commanders in U.S. Navy history. Morton trusted O'Kane completely, so Morton created a new system. O'Kane would man the periscope and call observations. Morton would stand in the conning tower, listen to O'Kane's reports, visualize the tactical situation, and make command decisions. This freed Morton from being glued to the periscope and let him think strategically instead of just tactically. It also meant O'Kane, one of the best tactical minds in the submarine service, was doing what he did best: hunting. It was brilliant. Second, Morton changed combat tactics. He told his crew, "We will attack everything we see. Everything. No target too small, no situation too dangerous. If it's Japanese and it floats, we sink it." And he meant it literally. Third Patrol, March 19, 1943. Wahoo spotted a Japanese convoy in the Yellow Sea, 2 freighters with destroyer escort. Morton didn't wait for perfect positioning. He drove Wahoo straight at the convoy on the surface, in broad daylight. The Japanese destroyer turned to engage. Morton waited until the destroyer was committed to the attack run, then crash-dived Wahoo and fired torpedoes at the approaching warship. Destroyer sunk. Then Morton brought Wahoo back to the surface and used the deck gun to sink both freighters. The 4-inch deck gun. A submarine fighting on the surface with artillery like a destroyer. That had never been standard practice. It was considered too dangerous. Submarines are vulnerable on the surface. Morton didn't care. If deck gun ammo was cheaper than torpedoes and the target couldn't fight back effectively, why waste torpedoes? March 21, 1943. Wahoo encountered a large Japanese transport in the Yellow Sea. Standard procedure, submerged approach, torpedo attack. Morton surfaced Wahoo in daylight, ran down the transport at full speed, and opened fire with the deck gun from 3,000 yards. The transport, unarmed and unable to escape, tried to beach itself on the Korean coast. Morton followed it into shallow water, still on the surface, still firing. The transport grounded. Morton kept shooting until it was a burning wreck. Then he backed Wahoo out of the shallows, reloaded, and went hunting for more targets. March 25, 1943. The patrol that would make Morton a legend. Wahoo intercepted a Japanese convoy in the Yellow Sea, 2 large passenger cargo ships escorted by a patrol boat. Both ships were transports carrying troops and supplies. Legitimate military targets. But they also had hundreds of people aboard. Soldiers, yes, but also civilian crew. Morton attacked. Wahoo fired torpedoes and hit both transports. They began sinking. Lifeboats were launched. Hundreds of people went into the water. And then Morton made a decision that would be controversial for decades. He ordered Wahoo to surface and attack the survivors with gunfire. For over an hour, Wahoo fired her deck gun at lifeboats and swimmers. Morton's reasoning: these were Japanese soldiers who, if they reached shore, would fight Americans again. It was war. But many of Wahoo's crew were deeply uncomfortable with the action. This incident has been debated by historians ever since. Was it a war crime? Was it justified military action against enemy combatants? Morton believed he was following his orders to sink everything, but he crossed a line that bothered even his own crew. What's not debatable is the result of Wahoo's third patrol. When USS Wahoo returned to Pearl Harbor on March 29, 1943, Morton claimed 9 ships sunk in 3 weeks. 9. More than many submarines sank in a year. Wahoo pulled into Pearl Harbor flying a broom from her periscope, the traditional naval symbol of a clean sweep, sinking every enemy ship encountered. Admiral Charles Lockwood, Commander Submarine Force Pacific, met Wahoo at the dock personally. Morton and his crew were greeted as heroes. The Navy studied Wahoo's patrol report, and they realized Morton had just shown them how submarine warfare should be fought. Aggressive, close range, surface attacks when possible, audacity over caution. Morton became the most famous submarine commander in the Pacific. Other captains started imitating his tactics. U.S. submarine kill rates increased dramatically, and USS Wahoo was just getting started. Patrols 4 and 5, April to July 1943, cemented USS Wahoo's reputation as the most aggressive submarine in the Pacific. But they also showed the limits of Morton's tactics. 4th Patrol, May 1943. Morton took Wahoo into the Sea of Okhotsk between Kamchatka and the Japanese islands. This was dangerous water, Japanese patrol aircraft, minefields, and heavy surface traffic. Morton didn't care. More danger meant more targets. May 7, 1943, Wahoo spotted a large Japanese cargo ship. Instead of a submerged torpedo approach, Morton surfaced Wahoo in broad daylight and opened fire with the deck gun from 8,000 yards. 8,000 yards is over 4 miles. That's artillery dual range, not submarine combat range. Wahoo's 4-inch gun wasn't designed for that kind of fight, but Morton was proving a point. Submarines could fight like surface warships if the commander was aggressive enough. The cargo ship fought back with its own deck gun. For 30 minutes, Wahoo and the Japanese freighter exchanged artillery fire, shells landing in the water around both vessels. A submarine engaging in a gun duel with a merchant ship. Wahoo's gunnery was better. The freighter caught fire and sank. May 9, 1943. Morton spotted a convoy, 3 cargo ships with a destroyer escort. This should have been too dangerous. A destroyer escort meant anti-submarine capability, depth charges, experienced crew, sonar. Standard doctrine: avoid convoys with destroyer escorts unless you have overwhelming tactical advantage. Morton attacked anyway. Wahoo surfaced ahead of the convoy and waited. When the ships came within range, Morton opened fire with the deck gun while simultaneously firing torpedoes. Combination surface and submarine attack. Nobody did that. It was insane. It worked. 2 cargo ships hit by torpedoes, sinking. The destroyer turned to engage Wahoo. Morton crash-dived, let the destroyer pass overhead, then came back to periscope depth and fired torpedoes at the destroyer's stern. Destroyer damaged. 3rd cargo ship sunk by deck gunfire. 3 ships in 1 engagement. Wahoo's 4th patrol sank 5 ships. When she returned to Pearl Harbor in June 1943, Morton's kill count stood at 14 confirmed vessels in 4 patrols. He was the most successful submarine commander in the U.S. Navy, and he was changing how submarine warfare was taught. Admiral Lockwood ordered other submarine commanders to study Wahoo's tactics. The Navy made training films featuring Morton's aggressive approach. Submarine School started teaching Morton's surface attack methods. Mush Morton had revolutionized American submarine warfare. But there was a problem. Morton's tactics worked brilliantly against merchant ships and lightly armed escorts. But the more successful Wahoo became, the more the Japanese adapted. By mid-1943, Japanese convoys were more heavily escorted. Anti-submarine patrols were more frequent. Air cover was better coordinated, and the Japanese had started specifically hunting for the aggressive American submarine in the northern waters. They were hunting for Wahoo. 5th Patrol, July-August 1943. Morton took Wahoo back to the Sea of Okhotsk. This patrol was different. The easy targets were gone. Japanese ships were traveling in tighter formations with better escorts. Air patrols had increased. Wahoo still sank 5 ships. But for the first time, Morton had to be cautious. He had to abort attacks because the tactical situation was too dangerous. He had to dive and evade rather than attack. The Japanese were adapting to Morton's tactics. And Morton was running out of sea room. When Wahoo returned to Pearl Harbor in August 1943, Morton requested permission for a 6th patrol. And he wanted to go where no American submarine had successfully operated before: the Sea of Japan. The Sea of Japan in 1943 was considered by the U.S. Navy to be effectively off-limits to submarines. Here's why. The Sea of Japan is almost landlocked, surrounded by Japan, Korea, and Russia. There are only 4 ways in: Tsushima Strait in the south, La Perouse Strait in the north, Tsugaru Strait through the Japanese islands, and Soya Strait in the far north. All 4 straits were heavily defended. Tsushima Strait, minefields, patrol boats, submarine nets, constant air surveillance, considered impassable. Tsugaru Strait, narrow, shallow, heavily patrolled. A few submarines had tried it, most didn't make it through. Soya Strait, far north, often ice-choked, rarely used even by the Japanese. That left La Perouse Strait. La Perouse Strait between Sakhalin Island and Hokkaido is about 40 miles wide at its narrowest point. Deep enough for submarines, not as heavily mined as Tsushima, but still extremely dangerous. The Japanese knew that if American submarines were going to enter the Sea of Japan, La Pérouse Strait was the most likely route, so they patrolled it heavily. Surface vessels, aircraft, shore-based radar, listening posts. Only one American submarine had successfully entered the Sea of Japan and returned, USS Permit in June 1943. And Permit's patrol had been cautious. She sank 2 ships and got out quickly. Morton wanted to do more than that. He wanted to operate in the Sea of Japan for weeks, sinking everything he found. September 13, 1943, USS Wahoo departed Pearl Harbor on her 6th war patrol. Destination, Sea of Japan via La Pérouse Strait. Before departure, Morton spoke to his crew. He told them this would be Wahoo's most dangerous patrol, that the Sea of Japan was Japan's home waters, heavily defended, full of targets, but also full of risk, and that if anyone wanted to transfer off before the patrol, he'd understand. Not a single man asked to be transferred. September 20th, 1943. Wahoo arrived at La Pérouse Strait after refueling at Midway. Morton chose to make the passage at night on the surface for maximum speed. Risky, Wahoo would be visible to radar and patrol boats, but faster than submerged transit. September 21st, 1943, 0300 hours. Wahoo transited La Pérouse Strait successfully and entered the Sea of Japan, and Morton immediately started hunting. September 23rd, 1 cargo ship sunk. September 24, 1 tanker sunk. September 27, 2 freighters sunk. Morton was using his signature tactics: surface attacks in daylight, deck gun whenever possible, aggressive pursuit of any target. But the Japanese were reacting. By late September, Japanese anti-submarine forces knew an American submarine was operating in the Sea of Japan. They increased air patrols. Escort vessels were placed on high alert. Convoy routes were altered, and they started hunting Wahoo specifically. October 5, 1943. Wahoo had been in the Sea of Japan for 2 weeks. She'd sunk at least 4 ships, possibly more, and Morton reported that patrol aircraft were becoming dangerously persistent. Morton made the decision to withdraw. Wahoo had achieved her mission. Time to get out before the Japanese concentrated enough forces to trap her. October 10, 1943. Wahoo reached La Pérouse Strait for her exit from the Sea of Japan. But something had changed. For 3 weeks, Wahoo had been sinking ships and evading patrols in the Sea of Japan. The Japanese Navy knew she was there. They knew she'd have to exit through one of the straits. And they'd reinforced La Pérouse Strait, the most likely exit route, with additional patrol boats and aircraft. They were waiting. October 11, 1943. Japanese patrol aircraft spotted a submarine transiting La Pérouse Strait on the surface. The aircraft radioed the contact to nearby patrol boats and then attacked with depth charges. 3 Japanese patrol boats converged on the position: PC-33, PC-34, and PC-36, and USS Wahoo fought her last battle. For 70 years, the exact details of USS Wahoo's final moments were unknown. She simply vanished. On October 11, 1943, Wahoo was supposed to exit La Pérouse Strait and radio Pearl Harbor that she was clear. The message never came. Days passed, then weeks. Wahoo was declared overdue and presumed lost on November 9, 1943. After the war, Allied intelligence reviewed captured Japanese records. They found reports of an anti-submarine action in La Pérouse Strait on October 11, 1943. Japanese patrol boats claimed to have sunk an American submarine. But the exact location and circumstances remained a mystery until 2006. In 2006, a Russian-American expedition located the wreck of USS Wahoo on the floor of La Pérouse Strait in 213 feet of water. The wreck tells a story. On October 11, 1943, Wahoo was transiting La Pérouse Strait on the surface. probably to make maximum speed and get through the strait quickly before Japanese forces could concentrate. Around 11 a.m., a Japanese patrol aircraft, possibly a Nakajima E-8N Dave floatplane, spotted Wahoo. The aircraft attacked immediately with depth bombs. Morton crash-dived Wahoo, but the strait was relatively shallow, and Wahoo couldn't go deep enough to escape detection. Japanese patrol boats PC-33, PC-34, and PC-36 arrived within minutes. They had Wahoo on sonar, and they began a coordinated depth charge attack. For over an hour, the three patrol boats dropped depth charges over Wahoo's position. Morton would have been maneuvering frantically, changing depth, changing course, trying to evade. But there was nowhere to go. The strait was narrow. The water was shallow. Three patrol boats with experienced crews were boxing Wahoo in. Around noon, Japanese records report a large underwater explosion and debris rising to the surface. Oil slick, wood planking, personal items. USS Wahoo was gone. 80 men died. Commander Dudley Morton, Executive Officer Richard O'Kane, and 78 crew members who had become some of the most experienced and aggressive submariners in the U.S. Navy. None survived. When the wreck was examined in 2006, evidence suggested that Wahoo had taken at least one direct depth charge hit. The explosion probably breached the pressure hull. At depth, the submarine would have flooded instantly. Submariners who die from hull breach don't have time to suffer. The pressure wave and flooding are instantaneous. If that's what happened to Wahoo's crew, and evidence suggests it did, then they died in seconds. Small mercy in a terrible death. So what killed USS Wahoo? Was it Morton's aggression? Was it bad luck? Was it the inevitable consequence of operating in the most dangerous waters in the Pacific? Here's what we know. Morton chose to transit La Perouse Strait on the surface in daylight. That was consistent with his aggressive style. Maximum speed, get through quickly. But it also made Wahoo visible to aircraft. Could Morton have transited submerged at night? Yes. It would have been slower and more dangerous navigation, but less visible. Morton chose speed and aggression. It had worked for him 19 times before. The 20th time, it killed him. After Wahoo was lost, the U.S. Navy changed its doctrine for operating in the Sea of Japan. Submarines were ordered to transit straits submerged whenever possible. Surface transits were forbidden except in extreme circumstances. Morton's tactics had revolutionized submarine warfare, and his death refined them. In 1945, a task force of 9 American submarines successfully penetrated the Sea of Japan and waged a devastating campaign against Japanese shipping. They used Morton's aggressive tactics, but with the cautious, straight transits that Morton had skipped. They sank 27 ships and all 9 submarines returned safely. Morton had shown them how to fight. His death showed them how to survive. Commander Dudley Morton was posthumously awarded 4 Navy Crosses, the second highest decoration in the U.S. military. USS Wahoo received the Presidential Unit Citation. Morton is remembered as one of the greatest submarine commanders in American history. But here's the paradox. Morton's aggression worked brilliantly for 8 months. 20 ships sunk. Tactics that changed how America fought submarine warfare. A legend that inspired an entire generation of submarine commanders. But that same aggression killed him. Was Morton too aggressive? Or was he exactly aggressive enough to change the war, but doomed by the nature of his tactics? We'll never know. Because Mush Morton died doing exactly what he believed submariners should do, attacking the enemy without fear. So let's come back to where we started. 20 ships sunk, 5 war patrols, 8 months of combat. USS Wahoo wasn't just a successful submarine, she was a revolution in how submarine warfare was fought. Before Morton, American submarines were cautious. After Morton, they were aggressive. Before Wahoo, submarines hid and ambushed. After Wahoo, they attacked on the surface and used deck guns. Mush Morton proved that submarines could be more than stealthy ambush predators. They could be surface raiders. They could fight like destroyers when the tactical situation allowed. They could take risks that conventional doctrine said were suicidal and succeed. But Morton also proved that there are limits to aggression. Operating in the Sea of Japan was strategically brilliant. Japanese home waters, rich with targets, psychologically devastating to the enemy. But the exit from the Sea of Japan required caution that Morton didn't practice. After Wahoo was lost, other submarines adopted Morton's aggressive attack tactics, but paired them with more cautious operational planning. Attack like Morton, but don't take unnecessary strategic risks. That combination, Morton's tactical aggression with better strategic caution, made American submarines devastatingly effective for the rest of the war. Today, USS Wahoo rests in 213 feet of water in La Pérouse Strait. The wreck site is considered a war grave. Russian and American authorities have designated it protected. 80 men remain aboard, still on patrol after 80 years. Remember USS Wahoo. Remember Mush Morton, the commander who believed submarines should fight, not hide. Remember that aggression can change warfare, but it carries a price. Remember that sometimes the greatest warriors don't survive, but their tactics do. Remember the 80 men of USS Wahoo who fought more aggressively than any submarine crew before them and paid the ultimate price for showing everyone else how it should be done. 20 ships, 8 months, 0 fear. One fatal mistake.